Okay, so we'll get started here. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Garden Hour with MU Extension. We're so glad that you're able to join us today on this gorgeous day. Low humidity and the temperature's just right to be out gardening. My name is Donna Aufdenberg, and I am your host for today. I'm located down in the Cape Girardeau area, and but I'm so happy to be here. We have lots of great and timely information for you today, as always. We love to see those questions coming through, and as the garden season keeps going on its way, hopefully we will see even more questions coming in. We don't wish for anybody to have garden problems, but we want you to know that we're here for you, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have, from starting a new garden to what's wrong with my plant to just about anything, even things like as timely as cicada information, which we're going to cover today. So please just keep sending in those questions and answers. We really enjoy answering them and learning with you. Let me put this state map up, and that way you can see who covers your area. This is a map with all the horticulturists listed around the state. You might take a look at where you're located and find the name closest to you. If at any time you want to reach out to any of us, doesn't matter if we're close to you or further away, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of us. Gwen has changed her name to Ask Questions Here. So if you have any questions at all during the presentations, please go to Ask Your Questions Here and type it in. And we will get back to you either during the program or sometime after. If it's close to the end of the program, you might consider putting your email address in there with it, and that way we can reach you at a later time. So right now we are going to have our weather report. Zach, you wanna get going on that?
Great. Thank you, Donna. And I have to agree, it's a beautiful day today, and I think we deserve it after some of the wet weather we've had over the past couple months and really over the past week as well. So last week and over Memorial Day weekend, it was a very active pattern across Missouri here. And so here we can see our radar estimated precipitation totals from the last week here. And what you can see is the entire state received at least some rainfall, but really the southern half of the state and south of the Missouri River picked up some of the highest rainfall totals from last week. And so anywhere you see yellow on this map, that's greater than 2 inches of rainfall. But we also have some spots like in southeastern Missouri where there were some pretty large or widespread bands of up to 5 inches of rainfall in these locations. So impressive rainfall totals, but that really wasn't the whole story from the weekend. I think the bigger takeaway was some of the damaging severe storms that we saw across the state as well. And so here we can look at our storm reports from Saturday and Sunday that covers most of the storms we saw over the weekend. But you can see on these maps lots of dots across the state of Missouri. And where you see red, those indicate tornado reports. We certainly had several of those across southern Missouri. We see several green dots, which show hail reports. So we saw several reports of hail in southwestern Missouri, but as those storms started to head east, became more of a damaging wind threat. And so we see some of these blue dots as well. But really quite a bit of severe weather and several damage reports as well, especially in the southern half of the state. And I did want to show, I think maybe the most notable tornado. So the National Weather Service has been doing a lot of damage surveys so far this week and have actually found an EF3 tornado that occurred. And this is really on the border of Texas and Howell counties in southern Missouri. But here you can see it was a 6-mile tornado path with winds up to 138 miles per hour. And that was enough to really damage some structures here. And that's what the rating of the tornado was based on. So similar to the picture here. So this tornado, after 6 miles, did lift. But after it got into Shannon County and traveled east about another 5 miles, it touched down again on the ground in Shannon County and had another path of about 3 miles. It was an EF2 tornado. And so a pretty strong tornado in southern Missouri. And we had many, many EF0 and EF1s, but this is the largest tornado that's been found so far. And if you're wondering that it's felt like this year we've had a lot of severe weather and maybe even more than usual, you would certainly be correct here. And so I'll show here on the left here, this is for the entire United States, the number of tornado reports we've seen this year. And so the red line here shows our accumulation of reports. We've got about 1,000 tornado reports so far this year. But what I really want to point out is when we compare to some of the other years, we're really pretty far ahead of normal. Now, we're not at 2011, where you can see kind of our green line that's far away from the rest, but still more active than other recent years. And on the right here, if we look at how those 1,000 tornado warnings can be mapped across the U.S., a lot of these are occurring in Missouri. And we've had the third most tornado warnings so far this year, behind Texas and Oklahoma. And we don't like to compete with Oklahoma for severe weather, knowing how much of those impacts they see there. Looking just at our state and looking at the same kind of thing at a county level here, we can see on the left, almost every county has had a tornado warning and had those sirens go off this year. In fact, a lot of counties in southern Missouri have had multiple tornado warnings this year. And the big winner, although maybe not a good thing to win here, would be Franklin County in red, 10 tornado warnings so far in 2024. And on the right, if we look at just those severe thunderstorm warnings, we've had many across the state and several counties that have had 20 or 30 severe thunderstorm warnings just this year. So impressive numbers. Just looking at tornadoes, really going back into the 1980s, this is about the third most active severe weather spring we've had in Missouri. So only 2011 and 2006 were more active this year with those tornado warnings. And really, if you look at the past 5 years or so, we haven't had a lot of widespread severe weather until going back to about 2019. So our first year where we've really had a spring like this in quite a while. But also, as these storms have left the area, you probably noticed in addition to all those thunderstorm and tornado warnings, we also had a lot of flash flood warnings over the weekend with some of that heavy rainfall. And this continues to help out really what's left of the drought situation. Here on the right, you can see the most recent update from the U.S. Drought Monitor, and there's not a lot of drought left across the state, really just in the Boot Heel and extreme southern Missouri. And I think we'll continue seeing that drought improvement after our recent rains here. And so the next time we meet for the Garden Hour will be in June, and it's getting to deep enough into the month where we can kind of make a guess at where we're going to end up here. And May is going to go down for the state as a warm and wet month. And so most locations are going to finish with temperatures anywhere from 1 to 6 degrees above average. And most spots are going to finish with rainfall above average for May as well. But I do want to show here on the right, this map shows our percent of normal precipitation so far for May. And we do have a few spots in northeast Missouri and over by Kansas City that have seen below average rainfall for May. So even though most of us are very wet, there's a few localized locations that could use a bit more rainfall at this point. And so moving forward, unfortunately, our gorgeous weather that we're seeing today, and here you can see our high temperatures in the 70s and lower 80s, low humidity. It really does feel like spring today, but unfortunately, that's not going to last for long. And so if you look at our surface map here on the right, you can see an area of high pressure over Missouri that's keeping most of us under clear blue skies today. But notice all of that green off to our west, and that is going to head our way and bring our next chances for rain here. And so our rain chances are really going to increase starting tomorrow. If we look at Thursday, Friday, and Saturday here, you can see this area of green that's showing those showers and rainfall slowly moving east. And most of this rainfall is going to be for western Missouri predominantly on Thursday and Friday. but I think everybody will get some rainfall by the end of the day on Saturday. And as we see here, just like the rest of May, we do have a marginal to slight risk for flash flooding based on how wet we've been as well. But the good news is that with this rainfall, there doesn't appear to be much of a severe weather threat here with these storms. So we'll take the rain without some of the damage we've seen lately. But here's what we're looking at for forecast rainfall totals through Monday. And it's a pretty tight gradient. I think this rainmaker is more of a Kansas-Oklahoma storm, but it does look like far western Missouri is going to get in on some of that heaviest rainfall. Where exactly that sets up, we're not sure, but could see up to 2 inches in western Missouri where you get some of the heavier rainfall there. Once we start looking ahead to next week, still a lot of uncertainty around how things will shape up next week, but I did want to show this. This looks like another good shot of statewide rainfall Monday through Wednesday of early next week as well. So this active pattern certainly continues. And finally, to end today, looking ahead with our 8 to 14 day outlooks that get us into the second week of June here. If you're a little tired of the rain, we have some good news here looking at our precipitation outlook. Probabilities aren't very high, but we are leaning below average for precip during that period and could have a nice dry stretch in that second week of June. So we'll keep an eye on the forecast and see if we can finally get a break from this rainfall. So that's all I've got for today, and thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, Zach. So at this point, we're going to start moving along through today's topics. And the first topic we have is by Gwen, and it is a question that we had come in. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got it wrong. First person that we're going to have is Peng, and he's going to talk about fire blight. So Peng, take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Donna. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peng Tian. I'm the director of the MU Plant Diagnostic Clinic. Let me minimize this window. Okay. I apologize. Excuse my my voice as I'm sick today and working at home. And there's no, I see sick plants, but just a sick person giving a talk of focusing on fire blight of apple and pear. Okay, this disease is very famous, and I also did some research. Actually, has a long history. A few points regarding the facts of this disease. It is caused by a pathogen called Erwinia amylovera, and this is a bacterial disease. So if you apply any fungicide-related chemical or sometimes horticulture oil, neem oil, it won't work because this is a bacterial pathogen and it transmitted in the vascular system in the plant. So it has really wide host range, including the apple and pear and several rosaceous ornamentals. I read through the Washington State University extension website. It actually can affect over 200 species. If you forget everything I'm gonna talk about today, just remember 2 keywords. One is scorching, because when this disease infects the plant, it causes really dramatic leaf symptoms. Looks like tree had been burned or twigs have been burned. The second word is called shepherd crook. So these twigs, which are infected by this bacteria, can decline very rapidly, and like I'm showing in this photo, the stem next to the leaves can start curling, making it look like a shepherd crook. So those are 2 words you need to remember to differentiate fire blight and other diseases of apple and pear. Let's talk about history. This pathogen is native in Eastern North America. First, it is also the first bacterium proven to be a pathogen of plants. I found a really old bulletin showing some preventable disease or treatment, and It was first reported in New York in 1780 and in 1887 in California. So it's marvel to me that this disease had been detected so long time ago and still very significant for the current all the orchard industry. So let's look at the symptoms. Let's start with the flower. So when this disease infects the plant, it will cause the flower to turn to be water soaking, drooping, and shriveling, turning brown and all black. And something interesting that the flower will remain attached through the growing season. So it will not cause defoliation or flower dropping. If you look closer to the symptoms, you actually can see those kind of like a milky substance like honey dew on the side of the blossom or the flower, and they are actually massive numbers of bacteria cell. During the really rainy and humid days, those bacteria are gonna ooze out, and somehow the pollinator, including the butterfly, flies, or bees, they're attracted to those honeydew look like substances, and they will help to transmit the disease tree to tree or twig to twig. I will talk about that during in the following slide when we talk about the disease cycle. So that's flower symptoms. Let's look at leaf and shoot symptoms. I would say it's a little bit difficult to see the early symptom of fire blight. Here is one example. The leaves will show blackening along the middle rib or vein before become fully necrotic, and the whole leaf will wilt, will become brown, and they're still attached to the stem. And again, no leaf dropping until very late in the season. And the shoot tips, like I mentioned, they wilt very fast, and they will form like a shepherd crook. The whole plant, if you look at the entire canopy, it will look like some branches have been burned. Here, I wanted you to pay attention to the difference between fire blight and Phytophthora. Phytophthora is a root rot disease and can cause a whole canopy wilting, and the leaves will be still attached to the branch or twigs, but the whole plant look like flagging. However, for fire blight, if you look at the entire canopy, most commonly you will see patches of dead or browning twigs, and they are more sporadic, sometimes sectional, and unless it is very severe infection, I don't expect to see the whole canopy turn to be wilting or browning in a short period of time. So that's a difference between fire blight and Phytophthora. For the fruit symptoms, most fruits will start developing once they get fully infected by the bacteria. But for some fruits, during the raining days, you can see the bacteria oozing out from the fruits, and some of the fruit will just stop developing. They turn dark, shriveled into a mummy, and they still remain attached to the branch for several months, and which definitely different with the mature, healthy fruits. Normally they are too heavy due to the size. Sometimes they can drop on the ground. How would those bacteria overwinter? How would they survive the cold winter in the Middle West? So they will cause the black and gray cankers, and all the bacteria cell will reside under the bark. If you use a knife to chop off the bark, you can see the red and reddish flecking close to the canker. That's an indication of the bacteria infection. However, in the winter, like everything else, bacteria will remain dormant and they're waiting for the spring, which leads to the disease cycle of this pathogen. So special thanks to Miss Tatiana Dubon from Washington State University Extension. She has such a beautiful drawing of the disease cycle of fire blight. So in the winter, all the bacteria will survive on the canker, and in the spring, with continuous rainfall and humid weather, the bacteria are gonna start oozing out. I'm not sure whether you can see the small little yellow dew out there. And those dew, which is the bacteria oozing, gonna attract the pollinator to fly to the canker, and they're gonna carry the bacterial cell to the flowers where the bacteria are gonna first infect the plants. And then the bacteria gonna transmit it from the flowers to the nectar, and then to the leaves, then to the stem, causing symptoms of both flower, leaves, and also the stem. So over time, they will continue this cycle and cause more problems, especially during the raining days or thunderstorm, heavy wind. Those bacterial cells can be also transmitted by wind or rain flash from different parts of plants, either within the plants or across different plants in the same property. That's how they transmit it and survive. And last, I'd like to talk about the disease management. Planting resistant rootstock will be the most ideal method in controlling this disease. And you may need to check online in Missouri to see which variety are most resistant to this disease. Some people may want to do some sanitation in the winter. Once the leaves are all gone, you will need to focus on the canker area. And once you locate a canker, you need to measure around 8 to 12 inches below the canker and make the cut. After that, you may want to do a late dormant copper applications, and that can help the plant to have some preventative approaches to feed themselves to get ready for the new season. As for the sanitation in the summer, which is approximately now, and if you see many symptoms showing up from your tree, you need to do a timely cutting of the infected material. You may want to scout your tree not every day, at least every week, as long as you see any infected branches. You need to remove the branches 12 inches below the infected tissue. Remember to sanitize the pruning tools with 10% of bleach. For the chemical, there are some recommendations. Copper-based pesticide and antibiotic-based pesticide are very effective for this disease. If you want to go organic, there are some biological control by Bacillus species. So those approaches are only applied to some commercial orchard owner, but sometimes the homeowner can still get access to those chemicals. And I would say those disease severity may vary from year to year. Like this year, we have a really wet spring. And in the past 2 years, I didn't receive so many calls or samples regarding this disease. So if you don't have this problem for consecutive year, I would say just it's okay. Just let it be. As long as you do a good sanitation both winter and the summer, there's no need to apply any chemical. And some copper application may be suggested if you have really heavy infection this year. You want to do that late in the season. I think that's all I have. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much. I give it to you, Miss Donna.
Okay, thank you, Peng. Okay, now we will move to Gwen. We received one question this week, and let me read it to you. I received a downy serviceberry April 23rd from Missouri MDC for their calorie pair buyback program. It is still in a 3-gallon pot in the vegetable garden as I am waiting for my landscaper to prep the new raised bed, but the tree is looking bad with leaves turning brown. What can I do about it? Okay, so Gwen, take it away.
Thank you, Donna. So serviceberry is one of my favorite small trees. It's kind of my signal that spring is coming because it's one of the earlier bloomers. So it's the first flush of color kind of early in the spring. And so I always kind of like to see that tree come around. With the Bradford Pear buyback program, I think a lot of the replacement trees probably were the serviceberry tree.
I'm back in a little bit, boys.
because I think it was one that has about the same kind of growth form and the white flowers and that sort of thing. So this may not be an issue just for one person, but it could be an issue for several people that took part in that program. So I want to talk a little bit about, it's not moving forward. Hold on just a second. There we go. Just to talk a little bit about serviceberry before we start, and I have the scientific name there. It does go by many common names. It's been called Juneberry because it starts putting on June berries in June. Shadbush because it starts when the shad, the little fish that's called a shad, start becoming active in the stream. There's serviceberry, which I think goes back to some French terminology, I believe is what I read. So there are many, many different common names, but mainly it's the Amylanchier genus that we're talking about. And its native range is almost all of Missouri, but up here in Northwest Missouri, my area, I might have to tend to it a little bit more than somebody that's down in the Ozarks. It does really well in those open, rocky woodlands and on the bluffs and in well-drained soil. So that's just, and it's a great plant for pollinators and wildlife. It supports a lot of our native fauna. So here are the pictures that came in, and you can see that is kind of concerning, right? There's a lot of leaf color that's changing and not really sure what's going on. And all of the horticulture, not all of us, but a few of us were the horticulturalists kind of looked at this trying to figure out what is going wrong. And I would just like to maybe, I know there are a lot of master gardeners on here, so maybe engage and put some things in the chat. What do you see? What would be some of the symptoms or clues that might help you diagnose what's going on with this problem? I'll just give a few seconds here for that. Let's see if anything comes through. Okay, I think what we mainly narrowed down is that this is an environmental issue, probably with either too much water or too little water. And it's really hard to tell based on the pictures that we have. If you read about just like when I was talking about the native range and the native soils of serviceberry, it likes really well-drained soils. So if I look at the base of this plant right here, and it could just be, this is from Adair County, so this is up near Kirksville. It could just be this was right after a rain, but it looks like it's really, really muddy down through there. And that could be just a symptom of it being too wet, for the spring that we've had. Or it could be a little bit too dry. One of the symptoms of it being too wet, I read, is that the upper leaves will start to turn brown and die before the lower leaves. It affects the new growth more than it does the old growth. But we really don't know for sure on this with the pictures that have come in. So things that we kind of have to be a detective here. So some things to consider, right plant in the right spot. So look at the tag on the plant. Does the site that you're planning to put the plant match the conditions for the growing conditions for the plant? For the serviceberry, it definitely needs to be a well-drained area. It will grow naturally along some of the wooded streams, but it really still needs to be that well-drained soil. Are you watering it too much or too little? Those symptoms kind of mimic each other just a little bit. And it could be that when it was put into the pot just for the buyback program, perhaps the root flare was buried too deep in the pot. That does happen quite often. So it might just need to be kind of lifted up a little bit so that the plant roots can get oxygen. And we also don't know were the roots root bound or pot bound in the pot itself to where the plant is not able to get enough oxygen and enough nutrients. So really, we don't know what is causing this problem, but I would recommend that the person reach out to the local horticulture specialist and maybe kind of monitor and let us know what's going on. And hopefully after it gets in its home in the real spot, some of those symptoms will go away. And Donna, that is all that I have.
All right, thank you, Gwen. So we've had a lot of rain occurring across much of the state, and one concern that several gardeners have shown is water wilt. And so that is a topic that Katie is going to cover. Okay, so take it away, Katie.
Okay. All right, can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So this is not a current picture. This was a picture these pictures were submitted some time ago, but I keep them because this does periodically happen. So gardener sent these in, and wow, you can really tell everything in the garden looks pretty flattened, or tomatoes or cabbage looks pretty dramatic. So just like plants can wilt from too little water, they can also wilt from too much water because those roots need oxygen. So we typically see it when we've had these heavy rainfalls, the soils are saturated, everything is wet, and then we get hot. So I'm hoping our saving grace, and we will not see this, is because we've had some nicer temperatures. It has been cooler, so hopefully we will not see this. But you can understand now, if you see it, what exactly it is and what is going on. Another note with too much water is that we can also see flash flooding. Now, this was a commercial grower. However, it can happen in home gardens depending on where you are situated. So you can see all the mud and the debris and all of that was left behind on those plants. And the reality is, if something gets flooded with flash flooding, that produce is no longer edible because we do not know what was in those flood waters. So don't eat from a garden that has had flash flooding and water go through it like that. However, on a positive note, muddy soils can allow you to pull some really good long-rooted weeds. So I pulled out this chicory out of one of my flower beds, and I was impressed that I was able to get the entire root out. It was over 12 inches long. So that just shows that you have to take the good with the bad, and we needed the rain, and now we have plenty. We can have some nice days for a little while. That's all I've got. Thanks, Donna.
Okay, so one thing I might add is if you have had a lot of rain and you are worried about water wilt, you might consider pulling mulch around if you have heavy mulch around plants. That's really the only thing that you can do. And unfortunately, it can be a sad situation sometimes. Okay, so next up we have Debbie, and she is covering the question of why are my radishes cracking?
Yeah, hello everyone. And so this is a common question that we get usually in the springtime. We see it a lot with radishes, and this was the picture that was submitted, and it's really interesting to see that almost every single one were kind of split right down through the middle. And so the question really is why are they doing that? So let's investigate this just a little bit. So splitting and cracking, and this picture here is pictures of carrots. They don't look very appealing. But the problems really with splitting and cracking of some of our root crops really are going to occur with carrots, parsnips, and radish predominantly. What we have found is that the older that root is, the more tendency that root does have in order to crack or to split. We do know that if there are poor irrigation practices, if it gets too wet, then it gets too dry, and you kind of do that seesaw type of watering, that can cause the roots to crack and split as well, simply because they're not taking in a lot of water and absorbing it, and then all of a sudden they get a lot of water and they really start expanding really fast. And it's that fast expansion that can cause that splitting and that cracking. So again, that erratic irrigation can actually be one of the causes. And sometimes it's just Mother Nature that does it, and we can't do much about that. But if it's our own watering, we need to pay closer attention to actually how we do water our crops as well. So the splitting and cracking, keep the soils moist to provide a good steady growth, but you don't want to keep them too wet or keep them too dry. So we really need to pay attention, go out in our gardens more frequently than we probably really are already. Some of the larger rooted cultivars or the older roots are more prone to the actual splitting than the smaller or the younger plants that we actually have in the garden. So you need to take into consideration, what is that cultivar? Is it a very large root that's going to be produced from that particular cultivar? Chances are they could have be more prone to actually splitting and cracking. If they are a much smaller cultivar, they may not be as prone. And so again, the older the roots, the younger the roots, and the type of cultivar that you have might be what you look at in the future if you do have a tendency to have your crops actually split or crack. And a lot of times we will find that the splitting and cracking actually happens closer to the harvest time, because again, it's when they're getting older as that root. But also if we have those early spring crops, especially those radishes that everybody likes to get in because they're quick. Within a month, we can have a radish from our garden. And so if you dig them when they're too cold and the ground is really cold still, that might have a tendency to cause those roots to actually split and crack as well. So we also, since we're talking about carrots, add this. I thought I would add this picture in. This is really interesting. Of course, that's not how we're going to see them at the grocery store, but that is what they might look like when they come out of our garden. They're still edible. It just might take, if you're a person who likes to peel your carrots, it might just take a little bit more time trying to peel those carrots. If you have dense, compact soils, those carrots actually are going to grow down where it's easy to grow. And then when they hit something that's in their way that actually provides that root then to actually could potentially split and go in different directions, or it might come straight down and then just do one major bend instead of splitting. So the tap root, the main root, is going to be damaged. And then that's why it might potentially send out those secondary roots. So you see the secondary roots that are here as well. And then these on this one over here, you can see those are secondary roots. And sometimes if the plant is still young enough, those secondary roots are going to go ahead and fill up so that you actually have more of that carrot that you're able to actually eat after you harvest them. So fertilizer placement, insects and disease damages, too much nitrogen, because remember, nitrogen is going to be for the top growth, the green. Whereas if you have too much nitrogen in the soil, may not have enough there for the roots to be able to grow really well, because we always like to say that phosphorus is good for good root growth. Fresh manure can also cause injury to roots. And that can also result in branching of our carrots. And we always have a tendency to say, don't use fresh manures. They can contain some contaminants. If we're looking at our produce safety, we need to make sure that manure is composted down for a set amount of time and at a specific temperature before we actually can use those manures in our garden. So you just need to be careful with that. And then I know I'd like to go ahead and just switch gears for right this moment. And I'd like to go ahead, Katie, Donna, and I are doing a webinar series. It starts next week on Monday evenings for 3 Mondays in a row. I'm going to do a presentation about diseases in the garden. And right now we're seeing a lot of diseases starting to pop up. Insects in the garden, and that is one that Don is going to do for that presentation. And I don't know about you, but I know we see the cicadas, so we're paying attention to those, but we may not be paying attention to what insects might be in our garden. But we really need to go out and start looking, because we want to try to control those as early as we can. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, the weeds, and Katie's going to do that presentation. And so we need to make sure that as our crops are growing, that we know which of those little seedlings are actually a true weed, not a seed we might have put in, because I don't know about you, but I might forget where I put some of my seeds in the garden. But also to make sure what are some methods that we could use to try to prevent so many weeds, so we don't have to go out there and just consistently weed. So for the full series, it's only $30. And there is a link right there, and I'll go ahead and drop that into the chat box. And we hope to see some of you guys at our webinar starting next week on Monday evening.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. So next up we have Katie again, and she is going to talk about periodical cicadas, because we've had a lot of questions coming in about them.
All right, are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay. So the first questions that started with periodical cicadas was, I have these weird holes in the ground. And so that is emergent holes for the cicadas as they come out. So we are still seeing these, and sometimes after the rains, there are still emergence going on. Some of it depends on where you are at, how much emergence is still coming. Then I took all of these pictures in my yard, so I am hearing lots of cicadas. They particularly like this crabapple in my front yard. As you can see, there are lots of quantity on there, and they're pretty loud there and along the edge of my wood line. So they really do like trees. We'll see if I can get this to play. This is a female, and you can see this is her ovipositor laying eggs in the tree. And you can hear the noise in the background. You can also see these little spikes of where she has been. So this is what the underside of the twigs look like. So some various, this was on the crabapple. This was on an elm tree, and this was redbud, I believe. So you can see the damage. Typically, they lay their eggs on fairly new little twiggy growth is where they ideally want to lay their eggs. And here's an example. This was from the last periodical cicada outbreak 13 years ago. This tree was a redbud branch, and somebody had brought it in a year or two later and wanted to know what is going on here. And this was healed cicada damage. And then after the storms that went through, I am seeing a lot of flagging on trees. So this redbud had lots of cicada slits in it. So you can see that flagging. And this elm tree also see flagging. And after the storms, a lot of these have landed on the ground. So you can see where that cicada had laid eggs, and the storms have twisted some of that off, and they're on the ground for their next part of the life cycle. The reality is that, this is part of it. If your tree is was too big to easily cover, they are typically going to survive it. It's just pruning off the little limbs. If a tree is really small, they can do some damage. Probably still not going to kill it, and it is a stressor. But for the most part, big trees, not going to matter. It's just part of it. And I will tell you that cicadas make great fish bait. So I've kind of been enjoying them. That constant hum in the background, but they have given me some great fishing adventures, and my dog loves to play with them. You have to take advantage of what we have, and it's pretty neat that they have such a unique life cycle. That's all I have for you.
Okay. Great, Katie. The very interesting stuff. I guess I had never really seen one laying eggs or really understood the damage that they did. So great information. And so
it's been fun to go out and watch and see what they're doing.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I don't have enough woods around my house. We don't have them where I'm at. Now, they are a couple of miles away. You can hear them as you're driving, but locally at my house, not necessarily. And so yes, I have heard lots of people having neat adventures with them. So the next topic is a topic I have been hearing people ask me about on fertilizing perennials. Let me get my screen shared. I know this is a question I know I typically have every year. Okay, now which ones am I supposed to be fertilizing? Which ones I'm not supposed to be fertilizing? So do perennials need to be fertilized? That is the question. And so the answer is it depends. I always try to encourage people that if you're planting in containers, then yes, because every time we water, we deplete that soil zone or that root zone of nutrition. And so if you're planting perennials in containers, yes, you're going to want to fertilize occasionally. If it's in-ground plantings, it depends on the plants. And so some things are heavy feeders, some things are not so heavy feeders. It just depends. And we'll talk about the do's and don'ts here in a minute. So as you can see, we have spring bloomers, we have summer bloomers, we have fall bloomers, we have foliage plants. And then, of course, we have wildflowers and natives. All of them are going to be a little different. And so one thing I will say is that do your research. And that way you know for sure what you need to be doing. So here's the best case scenario. You want to base your fertilization on a soil test. Most our soil tests run about $20 to $25, depending on which office you use and what service you use. And we really recommend fertilizing based on a soil test. That way you keep from over fertilizing perennials. Two indicators that you have over fertilized is too much lush green foliage, floppy blooms, or plants that don't bloom very much. Those are all signs that over fertilization has happened. And so it is good to know which ones can tolerate it and which ones cannot. Some of your books say to fertilize once a month with a general or all-purpose 10-10-10 or 20-20-20. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are some plants that just won't take that. And that's where it goes back to knowing your plant's requirements. My further advice is build the soil. If you have worked on building your soil and you have a nutritious soil, you shouldn't have to be putting on fertilizer. Some resources even say to put on a thin layer of compost every year, and that will take the place of any needed fertilization. And that is great advice for things like the native plants and the lower maintenance type perennials. Mulching can also provide nutrition once it breaks down and once it returns back to the soil as organic matter. So if you are a mulcher every year, you might not need that fertilizer application. Once again, it all goes back to that soil test. Base it on a soil test. And once again, I can't emphasize this enough. Look for those warning signs. And if a fertilizer is in definite need, you want to do it early in spring or very early summer. Try not to do fall or late fall fertilization because you don't want the plants to keep going. You want them to go dormant and be ready for winter time. One I want to address is the native plants. Most of these native plants don't want any fertilization at all. They are made by nature to handle low fertility areas. And if you notice in parts of the state where we do have low fertility, the natives are typically more beautiful and more sturdy and more beautiful. I probably said that twice, but they are just more wonderful. And so just keep that in mind. These are two very common, dear to my heart natives. On the left, we have purple milkweed. On the right, we have purple penstemon, or what we call penstemon cobia. And these are two that will become very, very floppy, lots of green growth, and very little blooms if you choose to fertilize them. So they just really have a negative impact. And there are flowers that are higher maintenance or higher nutrition needs. There are things like mums and lilies and phlox and the Shasta daisies, like what I had in the previous slide. All those can handle that heavier fertilization. And so just keep that in mind. But where we find that you grow more natives, then you don't want to fertilize at all. So, all right. So that took care of that topic. And so, our final topic is from Debbie. She's going to do a little bit of hort terminology.
Okay, so I have, whoops, sorry. Yeah, this is right. So I see that some of my master gardeners are on and they're probably going to go, yeah, we heard this term last night at our chapter meeting from the presentation that was there. So I tell them when I sit in the back of the room, they see me playing on my phone. It doesn't mean I'm playing on my phone. I'm actually doing some other types of works and picking up ideas on where I might want to go with some of my different programming. So they'll recognize this and hopefully they'll get the right answer. So the term today is ephemeral. So we use this term every so often. It's not a very common term, but yet it's a term we do hear. So we'd like to know, is it a short lifespan or a short annual period of above ground growth, a long lifespan or a long annual period of above ground growth, or a normal lifespan for the above ground growth? And so Jarrett's going to throw up the questions here, or for you to be able to select the poll answer of what you want. A lot of folks are starting to answer this question. I'm seeing it kind of fluctuate back and forth here. Man, you know, I have a hard time stumping you people from one week to the next. All righty, at least half of you have participated in the poll, so I'm going to end it. I'm going to share the results. And like I said, 73% of you say that it's a short life, 13% say long life, and only 13% also say that it is a normal lifespan. And if you couldn't tell from my already words and descriptions, ephemeral is a plant with a very short life cycle or a very short period of actual active growth. It's often a plant that grows only during very brief periods of time when conditions are favorable. And so we're sitting here thinking about what are some of those plants. So I have a couple of examples. Most of them are going to be springtime plants. So bloodroot, spring beauty, mayapple, and my previous house when I was in Hillsboro, I backed up to some woods and there was a lot of mayapples and they're really a fun plant. But these three plants we definitely will see in the spring. They're there for just a short period of time. And if I walk back in those woods, I couldn't even find where the mayapples were about a month and a half later. So good for you all. I'm going to have to really work hard to come up with some terms that you guys don't know.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. So we have a few extra minutes. Are there any questions that have came in?
I have not received any questions.
Okay.
But
So the audience, do you have any questions that you want to post into the chat? We'll give you a few seconds here.
And if you don't have a question off the top of your head right now, just remember that you can always email one of us, or you could go out to where you signed up originally. Don is going to show that, and send your question there, because as you go through the week and you're out playing in your yard, in your garden, in your landscape, and you're like, wow, I wonder what this could be or what that might be, or I have this question, jot it down in your memory to remember, and then come back and Donna will explain how to get a question to us.
Okay, so always remember that these are live streamed and recorded, so you can go back and rewatch segments. You can also go back and watch certain videos that we took snippets of. And so it's a really good way to update your gardening information, and a lot of good information out there, a lot of good speakers. And so definitely go back to the YouTube site, the MUIPM at YouTube, and take a look at some of those videos. It's a great way, like I said, of refreshing your gardening information. So remember that we meet weekly from noon to 1 right now throughout the summer. And if you want to save the chat, you want to open up the chat box, and there's 3 dots at the top. You want to click on that 3 dots. It will have a drop down menu, and you can save that chat. And that way you get all the web links that have been chatted for the day. And so if you want to ask questions in the future, you have to go back to the registration page and ask your questions there. I thought, do we have that? I guess we took that out. So I'll have to put that back in for next week. But you can go and ask that back on the registration link, and that way it gets sent to us, and we can have that on future episodes of the Garden Hour. So just remember that anytime you can reach out to one of us and ask garden questions at any time. And here's the map once again, so that you can see who your local person is and reach out to them. Okay, so thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.